Welcome to this interview. So why do you want to study medicine? Oh no, I wish I'd watched How to Prepare for a Cambridge Medicine Interview. Hey guys, my name's Shiraz. I'm a fourth year medical student at Cambridge University, and in this video I'm going to give you guys my 3-step guide to preparing for a Cambridge Medicine interview. And let me just preface this by saying I'm not going to give you all the generic advice of knowing your personal statement and all of that stuff that you just really should be doing. This is a video for those who are serious about preparing for the Cambridge Medicine interviews. Those students who want the tips and tricks to help them excel in these interviews. So my first tip is breadth over depth. So what does this mean? What this means is that you should have a broad general conceptual knowledge over most of the major areas that could be asked in the Cambridge Medicine interview. So what are these major areas? These are things like physiology, immunology, pharmacology, and all of those kind of broad fields that are encompassed by medicine. You do not need to be an expert in the brain, in the heart, in the kidneys, in the lungs, in any insane depth. Remember, the point of the interview is to understand how you think more than what you know. Although, of course, you do need that baseline knowledge and conceptual understanding, much more than memorizing all these tiny details and trying to cram as much as possible. What I would personally recommend doing, what I tell my students to do, and what I personally did to prepare for the interviews, was I thought about why the human body is designed the way it is. So for example, the lungs. The lungs operate via a mechanism of pressure differentials. So when you inhale, the pressure within your lungs decreases and therefore air floods into your lungs. I've thought of reasons why our body is designed this way, the advantages and disadvantages, and any changes you might make to a theoretical system. I think this would be the broad approach I'll take to preparing for the content part of interviews. And if you guys want to learn more about preparing for Cambridge Medicine interviews, on Tuesday the 26th of November I am holding a 2.5-hour webinar from 5 to 7:30 p.m. UK time on preparing for Cambridge Medicine interviews. This is going to include a guide to preparing for interviews, an example mock interview, interactive Q&A sessions where I ask members of the audience to answer specific interview questions and then go over how I'd improve the responses, as well as a section where I talk about my own model answers to sample made-up interview questions. This is a brilliant opportunity to hone your interview skills before your Cambridge interviews. And for 2.5 hours of brilliant teaching, you will only pay a price of £25. The Google form to sign up to my webinar is below. So that's the first tip. Go for breadth over depth, although being an expert in one or two things doesn't hurt. The second step to preparing for a Cambridge Medicine interview is being able to frame your answers well. So let's say you have this great conceptual understanding of lots of different areas. Now you want to communicate this to your interviewer as efficiently and as expertly as possible. And this is where framing is really important. The structure that I personally recommend to my students is components, purpose, and then how the components and purposes relate to each other. Obviously this doesn't apply to every single question, but it's a pretty good broad framework for answering lots of questions. So I'll give you an example. Let's say we're talking about the immune system. So what's the purpose of the immune system? To protect us from pathogens. What's the immune system made up of? The innate and adaptive immune systems. How do these two arms of the immune system achieve the core purpose? What are the benefits and disadvantages of having a system like this? And I think this is quite a good framework, especially if you combine it with thinking from first principles. So this is essentially when you explain a concept from its very basic inklings. And this is something that, from my own experience, I think they really look for in Cambridge interviews. So for example, I'll give you 2 responses to the question, what does the heart do? The first response is, the heart pumps blood around the body. Very basic response, factually correct, but it lacks that depth that really makes you stand out. A better way to answer the question is, okay, so from first principles, all of the cells in the body need oxygen and glucose. So how do we get these substances to the cells? Well, we need blood to do that. So then how do we get blood around the body? Well, we need the heart to do that, to allow for continual blood flow. And for these reasons, the heart is adapted with lots of myocardial muscle to pump blood long distances. It's a much more thought out, expert sounding and well articulated way of answering the same question. And I would definitely recommend getting very, very good at this, getting very good at thinking out loud and thinking from first principles. And my third tip for preparing for Cambridge medicine interviews is to practice. Practice, practice, and practice some more. What do you actually gain out of practicing? So, practicing without improvement is simply wasting your time. What I would do is I would either get a tutor, and I do offer one-to-one mock interviews. Again, Google form below if you want to apply. I would nitpick. I would look at the small things, and I'll give you a couple of examples. One thing I really pick up on is if you say kind of a lot. Kind of just sounds quite colloquial, quite casual, and doesn't sound too refined. A better way of saying kind of is essentially. So let's say the immune system kind of protects us from pathogens. You kind of sound unsure of yourself. A better way of saying that is the immune system essentially or fundamentally protects us from pathogens. Suddenly you sound a lot more like an expert. And I'll definitely scrutinize little things like your language choices, your ability to maintain eye contact, your hand gestures, and kind of even to the point of your facial expressions. Remember, this is a Cambridge medicine interview. You are competing for something which is very difficult to get. You want to perfect absolutely everything you can. I think for this specifically, having a tutor or mock interviewer can actually really, really help. I personally had one and I think it was quite useful. Students that I've tutored have also said that it's extremely useful. So I definitely would recommend or attend the webinars. It's definitely good to get some external input. So there you have it. That is my 3-step guide to preparing for a Cambridge medicine interview. And I want to leave you guys with one last thought. And this last thought is that above all, an interview is meant to be a conversation. It's meant to be a conversation between an interviewer and an intellectual mind that they are hoping in the future they'll be able to take on and supervise. So above all, make sure that you are interactive, make sure that you are responding to questions, make sure that you always have an answer, make sure that if you're unsure of a question, that you clarify it with them. Remember, it's a conversation. Don't feel like you have to be robotic. In fact, that's probably one of the last things you want to come across as. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and make sure to sign up to the webinar below.